Raise your hand if you've ever felt stressed, overwhelmed, or anxious. I guarantee you, at some point of your life, you felt all three of these. And they all kind of work together, right? Sometimes you feel overwhelmed and then you're stressed at the same time. And that leads to anxiety, which could even cause an anxiety attack, which is crippling. Like one of the most crippling things you could have is an anxiety attack because you're not very productive when you're undergoing an anxiety attack. And so I am going to teach you a couple of things that I've learned from experience because back in the day, I was so stressed and anxious that I actually had to get prescribed medication when I was doing my thesis on grouper in the Virgin Islands. And I came out of the doctor's office crying because I didn't want to be on pills. I didn't want to be on medication that, calms me down. So I want to go ahead and go over the things that I've learned and share with you so that you can integrate it into your life as well. So number one, you have to identify your triggers because everybody's are always different. Some people, they have a whole bunch of stuff they feel like they can't complete in a certain amount of time. They feel overwhelmed because they don't know how to get it all done, and they don't like figure out how to like prioritize and do a checklist and get all the things done, and it overwhelms them, stress them, and makes them feel anxious. Other people could have different types of triggers, like going up in public and doing like public speaking, or like they have like that social anxiety kind of thing. So you got to figure out like what your triggers are, what causes you to be in a state where it feels uncomfortable to where you feel like you're not even being productive, right? So figure out what your triggers are. Everybody's triggers are different. And number two is to uh, practice mindfulness. Now, one thing about stress and anxiety that most people don't realize is that number one, if you don't get a lot of sleep, it can cause stress and anxiety and overwhelm. So, getting like 7 to 8 to 9 hours of sleep is pivotal for your health. And if you're getting like 3 or 4 or 5, of course you're going to feel uncomfortable because you're not getting enough sleep, right? And then on top of that, just to go on top of the sleep, is how much caffeine you're drinking. I've seen so many people complain about being anxious or feeling overwhelmed, and they're drinking like 4 cups of coffee in the morning, right? Or throughout the day. Now, what happens is, especially when you drink all this caffeine and you don't burn off, let's say like you just drink your coffee and you're sitting in a chair, like your heart is going to start to race. Like you're going to have all this energy, but you're not expending this energy. You might be you're thinking you're expending it, with your brain, but if you don't work off all that caffeine, it's going to build up and it's going to cause stress and anxiety, kind of make you a little wired. But it's like this relationship where I feel like we have to have that caffeine in order to make us feel like we can function. But in actuality, what it's doing is actually making us not be able to function because we're feeling overwhelmed and stressed and anxious all at the same time from all this caffeine and not being able to burn it off. Right. So, and then this leads me to my next practice is one of the things that people really fail to do when they're feeling anxious and stressed is they kind of like they kind of almost like hyperventilate. And what they do is they breathe with their people breathe with their chest. And honestly, I think 90% of the world breathes with their chest. So if you do breathe with your chest, you're not alone. And what I mean by breathing by your chest is when you exhale, you put your chest out, and then when you inhale, you bring your belly out. Wait, sorry, the opposite. When you inhale, you bring your chest out. And when you exhale, you bring it in. Right? That's what most people do, especially when we are stressed out. Right? And I really, if you do catch yourself doing that, please don't do this. Please, please, please. And please try to breathe into your diaphragm. So on the inhale, your belly goes out. And your exhale, your belly goes in. So this is a way to practice mindfulness. And if you want to really reduce the amount of stress and relax yourself, you want to prolong those exhales. So you want to kind of like make your mouth into a you can do it either through your mouth or throughout your nose. However you feel. Nose actually works a little better, but sometimes it's more difficult to restrict the breathing for people when they haven't done like the ocean breath. That's a completely different video for you guys, but I would try to do like a 4 to 6 count. So you breathe, inhale on a 4 count, exhale on a 6. And do that 5 to 10 times. And then you will automatically feel more relaxed. Right. So this is a part of mindfulness. And if you do want to integrate this type of breathing into your daily routine, you could sit aside for like maybe 5 to 10 minutes where you just sit silent, cross-legged, and just practice those belly breaths. And over time, your body and mind and soul will all be connected and be work nice and slow. And that's another thing that happens, right? When we feel stressed, we're like trying to do a million things at once. We're like moving fast and stuff like that. And what you're doing on the outside is what's happening on the inside. What's going on the inside is happening on the outside. So if you just take the time to slow everything down, just slow the way you move, slow the way you breathe, and start looking at, okay, what are the things that need to happen? What are the things that need to get done? And then start making a checklist and getting them done one at a time. Bam, bam, bam. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling uncomfortable? How can I move past this? And this is where the journal comes into play. Man, if you don't have a journal and you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, or anxious, you need to get yourself a journal, because what you can do is just reflect on how you're feeling and how you can move forward from that. Because when we're in the zone or we're in an anxiety attack, all we're thinking of, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to die. Right? That's what you feel like. It's like a fight or flight. It's like almost like a deer in the headlights. And when you're able to slow everything down, write down how you're feeling, you can move past it. Right. Another thing is to be able to set boundaries, right? When if let's say you're at work and your boss just like slams all this stuff down on the table and you just feel completely overwhelmed, one thing you can do is let this person, if it's your family member, or if it's your boss, one thing you could do is you could just let them know, it's like, hey, listen, um, I'm trying to be as efficient as possible, and the last workload you gave me was a little overwhelming, and it caused me to be stressed and anxious, and it made me be less productive. So is there any way we can knock out maybe a little uh, less of a workload per day, and I can be more efficient, and I'll work up to the amount of work that you're giving me? You know, Everybody wants efficiency. So it doesn't matter who you're talking to. You can be like, I'm going to try my absolute best. If you want me to, I'll cut certain times out of my day so I can work a little bit harder to be more efficient. But just remember to set those boundaries and really make sure that other people know that you're losing efficiency by taking on too much. Or if it's like your friends, people who are your friends, and they're like, hey, can you go to this event? Hey, can you do this for me? Hey, can you do that? You can do this, and your schedule just gets super packed up. You have to be really able to practice saying your no's. You can't do everything, right? So don't overwhelm yourself with a whole bunch of stuff, because it's not good for your health. Set aside some days where you're like, today I'm not gonna do any Instagram or social media today. Or you can say, oh well, Sunday's gonna be my self-care day. Like, really take the time to take care of yourself, because if you don't, you're just gonna be wired and like short-circuited all the time, and nobody wants to live like that. It's not how we're meant to live. A little bit of stress is good, because like when you're training, you want to be under a little bit of stress. You want to feel like, because stress can also have like give you energy, because you're feeling like, oh my gosh, like you have that fight or flight where you're like, I need to kick it into higher gear, right? And you can use that to propel yourself forward and be more productive, right? But if you go too hard and your health isn't in alignment with all the things you're trying to take on, and you're anxious about the future, it just makes you less productive. Right. And the next part is to seek support. So whether that be from your friends or family, or whether it be a therapist, if you're going through a really, really tough time, and it seems like you're anxious all the time, really try those things that I told you, like the breathing, the meditation, the reflecting in your journal, the thinking about how much caffeine you're intaking, getting a really great amount of sleep, eating a healthy diet. Like, everybody will tell you all these things. It doesn't matter what it is, but like your health, it should be your number one concern, because it's difficult to be 100% productive if you're not 100% in your health. And it's hard to help other people when you cannot help yourself. So help yourself first, seek support. look out, if you really need to, if you're in really in a pinch and you have like chronic stress or chronic anxiety, like I said, like when I was in grad school, like I had to take some medication and I honestly bawled my eyes out because the last thing I wanted to do was take medication. But I took it for about 2 weeks, and then after I stopped taking it, and I was fine. I realized that I was smoking some cannabis back then, and I was drinking coffee regularly and not getting a lot of sleep. So that's really what caused the stress and anxiety, right? And then once I got off the medication, I realized that I needed to kick back on that some more, and then I was perfectly fine. So yeah, and then of course, like it may come back, like where you feel more stressed and anxious because something big might happen in your life. And I would say, like going towards the medication, if you're on medication, it works for you, great. If you are not on medication and you haven't got prescribed yet, I would highly recommend just to try those other things that I talked about first. And then if you still need some more help, it may help you through a difficult situation and may make life a little easier for you temporarily. But as far as like using medication for the rest of your life, that's totally up to you, and it's up to you and your doctor. And I cannot tell you what to do in that situation. But as for me, I would rather work through it naturally first and then possibly look towards medication. So thank you guys so much for being here. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, this is actually something that we cover in my coaching program, because a lot of times there's stress and anxiety that is the cause for people drinking, right? They're like, oh, I feel stressed and my life's down to shit. And like, all I want to do is relax, have a bottle of wine, have 4 or 5 beers, right? And then what happens is when you start to get sober, you feel everything, and there's no like coping mechanism that is outside of yourself. It's when you stop drinking, you have to deal with it on your own, and that's where that journal reflection and the meditation and breathing comes into play. And then over time, when you stop relying on alcohol, which actually increases your stress and anxiety, like scientifically proven to increase stress and anxiety over time, once you get rid of it, your stress and anxiety goes down, and you can start working and using healthy coping mechanisms instead of just making the things worse. And I'm telling you what, I went from somebody who was so stressed and so anxious a lot of the time. Especially, I remember being in this boat ramp and I was just yelling at. I was with my ex-girlfriend and my mom. I was like yelling at them because we were going too slow and people were waiting and it was embarrassing. I literally never feel stress, like hardcore stress, ever. Since I stopped drinking, I really never. I had one anxiety attack, and that was because I drank too much caffeine. It was literally right after I drank caffeine. It was like bam. So that is why I'm telling you guys, please watch your caffeine intake and watch how many hours you're sleeping. And if you are working at 100% efficiency and you are the healthiest you can be, this is where your stress levels are going to decrease, because you're doing everything that you can for your body, and your body's going to repay you with being able to be as efficient as possible. So thank you so much for being here. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Much love. Have a beautiful night.